Brett, what you got to say, buddy?
Greetings and salutations, everyone.
All right. So today we're going to get started with some crypto news. And the first thing we're going to talk about is on our favorite Coin Telegraph. Great place to get your information, as we do. Stablecoin market escaping U.S. regulatory oversight is the title, Chain Analysis. And this was done 9 hours ago, and today is October 27th. So what this basically is saying is that stable activity has been increasing, occurring through entities that aren't licensed in the United States, according to Chain Analysis. The United States government may be losing regulatory oversight over the stablecoin market, according to new reports by blockchain research firms Chain Analysis. Stablecoin activity has been increasing, occurring through entities that aren't licensed in the United States. Chain Analysis stated in its latest North American cryptocurrency report released on October 23rd. According to Chain Analysis findings, the majority of stablecoin inflows to the 250 biggest cryptocurrency services have shifted from U.S. licensed services to non-U.S. licensed servicing since spring 2023. As of June 23rd, about 55% of stable inflows to the top 50 servicers were going to non-U.S. exchanges, the report states. What do you got to say about that, Mr. Jennings?
No kidding. That is exactly what happens when you want to have severe regulation and impose things that aren't even laws and try to enact them as per se laws. This is exactly what happens when you try to silence technology and you send it overseas. That's exactly what happens. So imagine that. An amazing technology like cryptocurrency or blockchain combined with something with the technology of cryptocurrency can't be stopped, period. So the United States can come in all they want and try to make unfair regulations or assumptions about things and try to stop it all they want. But this is the point where, who was it? I forgot what author said that a good idea is something that just can't be stopped. I don't care what it weathers. I don't care what it goes through. Amazing ideas can't be stopped, period. So when you have an idea like cryptocurrency and what it can do with transferring and facilitating value in a split second throughout the world, you can try to squash that all you want, but all you're going to do is simply send it overseas into other markets. It's not going to stop it. It's just going to send the competition. It's just going to make the other countries more competitive. That's it. And that's a prime example of that. What do you think?
Well, you got 55% of stable inflows to the top 50 servicers were going to non-U.S. licensed exchanges, the report stated. 55%. That is absolutely crazy. 50 servicers that are not regulated by the U.S. That means that our theories over these many podcasts is coming true, Brett. It looks like they are going elsewhere. They're avoiding the United States and this regulatory impossibility that they're promoting. Like we talked about several times, it looks like the crypto may be going underground.
It 100% is. Well, here's the great thing about what the United States is starting to do right now is despite that, that's the end result of the United States trying to push away crypto for the past year or 2 years, pretending like it wasn't a real thing or didn't have real value and pushing it overseas. That's a prime example of that. So I think that now that we're starting to get regulatory clearance, I think that Gary Gensler is going to be out soon enough. And you've already had hedge funds that are starting to get approved or are going to be approved for ETFs. In fact, yesterday, it was announced that the ETF ticker symbol for BlackRock's ETF, Bitcoin ETF, so it's not approved yet. It's not available yet, but the ticker symbol for it came out yesterday, and it skyrocketed Bitcoin by what, 12%, 13% in a matter of a few hours. It went over 35,000 for the first time in almost 2 years. That's what happens when you embrace regulation. So now we're going to be able to keep these companies and these people here in the United States, which is exactly what you want to do. Like the United States has managed to stay ahead of the game because we've embraced new technology. We've embraced new practices of things. We've been open-minded to that. And when you're closed-minded and you just have corruption and you have everything stomp everything down, that's the end result of basically every other country that exists in this world right now.
My 2 cents, which 2 cents isn't worth a lot anymore, is Gary Gensler is part of an orchestrated plan. And the plan is not very hard to figure out. It was started back in 1995 with the creation of the beginnings through the NSA of the framework of what is now Bitcoin. Not that they did it, but I'm highly suspicious that all this came about without some major funding and the cooperation of major banks. And right now, it seems to me like Pandora's box has been opened. And since many entrepreneurs were allowed to come in and play with this SHA technology to create platforms where people can do decentralized activity, we are now watching a full-on panic of the banking industry who wanted to use this platform specifically to get rid of cash and keep more control over the citizenry. So this is a prime example how they are trying to put fingers in a dike that is going to burst at any moment. Because like you said, you can't keep an idea that time has come down. And they're in a full-blown panic right now because they have an agenda that needs to be met by a certain amount of time. And in that case, it could be 2030. And with all of these entrepreneurs coming into the space, trying to grasp freedom and the dream of being able to be your own boss and not being beholden to anybody. I get it. But this is the beginnings of the end. Either for Bitcoin, either for crypto or for the bankers. There's not going to be an in-between.
This is what you're talking about, like bring that
Nothing
into
is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Victor Hugo is the French poet novelist who credited with this phrase.
Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come, period. So here's what I can't stop thinking about, Pedro. What if where we're at right now with crypto is where they've always wanted us to be with crypto? What if what our thoughts about crypto is right now is exactly what they've always wanted us to think about crypto? What if everything that they're going to change for regulation and everything that crypto is going to be, what if that's always been their plan? What if where we're going with crypto is where they've wanted us to go with crypto? What if everything that's been occurring, is occurring, and is going to occur is right in sync with everything they've always wanted?
Profound thoughts by Mr. Jennings.
Jack Handy.
Here's, all right. He's killing me.
Let's be professional, Pedro. We got time.
All right. So here's the problem with that. How do you get mass integration of their ultimate goal, which is a CBDC? How do you get mass integration? How does that happen? And I would say by bringing in technologies and allowing them to flourish so that the common man can pump what they want pumped. Now, they have nothing but time. When they write their agenda, they write it in decades.
What a great distraction from printing 80% of all the money supply we've ever printed as a country in the past 3 years, right? So if you want another storyline, if you want someone's attention over here and you don't want them to pay attention to something over here, you distract them and put their attention over here. So what a great storyline. Crypto and the scam crypto and Bitcoin isn't backed by anything and it's a scam. What a great storyline to have to distract you from what we're actually doing, which is printing money that's completely worthless, that's backed by absolutely nothing. It's an amazing distraction. And then at the end, we'll throw in COVID, which kind of brings us to our next topic. What we're talking about is, so people know that during the COVID lockdowns, okay, there were thousands of ATM machines that were shut down around the world. 8,000 in the UK and 19,000 ATM machines that were closed in the United States during COVID. They have yet to reopen, and they're not going to reopen them. So this is just one of many signs of the government prepping you for CBDCs. Okay? If we take cash out of the system, it's all completely digital, and at the end of the day, controlled by the central banks. So taking cash out of the system, yes, it hurts our rights as an American, don't get me wrong, but who it really hurts the most are small to mid-sized banks. And you're making everything flow towards the central banks that run everything anyways, but what they're doing is the cashless system is taking the middleman, which are the small and middle-sized banks, out of the equation as well. Where Philadelphia has made it illegal to refuse cash. So they've actually made it a city law where you have to accept cash for your establishment.
The bottom line is their agenda back in the 90s, they realized that inflation was going to destroy the dollar. And so they started a plan, in my humblest of opinions, through Shaw, to be able to come up with a blockchain technology that they could use to be able to come up with something like a CBDC. I'm sure it wasn't named that back then, to be able to get off this type of fiat system and create a new one. Well, this one wouldn't have dollar bills or coins, but would have a digital card. And if you notice, one of the big things about COVID, aside from ATMs disappearing and chains of, for example, Chase Bank has disappeared from our area in a bunch of different places. I don't know if that's true with all of the branches nationwide, but I've seen it personally where it used to be really convenient to have Chase. It was Wells Fargo. Then all of a sudden, a bunch of branches are consolidating and closing down. Very few ATMs. But if you think about that for a second, and their agenda is to cease all ATMs by 2037, why would they put that date in? And the answer to that is because they know that before then, most people will be accustomed to using CBDCs. Now, in COVID, if you remember, you were all given what? A card. It was a Bank of America card, so you can go and use to be able to buy goods and services. Then the IRS would directly deposit money into your account as well if you filed a tax return, depending on how many kids or whatever, right? But you got a Bank of America card and direct deposit. Well, why would they do that? One of the reasons is it's called conditioning. So if you're used to receiving the money, right, there is a term for that. Do you know what that term is? Do you know what that term is?
I have no clue.
Okay, so they wanted to get us conditioned to a universal basic income. That's just my opinion. But a universal basic income has been championed by the United Nations for many years, that everyone deserves a certain amount of money no matter who you are. Well, that rings as Marxist to me, but I don't know what it rings to you. But that goes hand in hand to this ATM disappearance. Then you wanted to talk about another one. It's called Adam and Eve story.
Oh, Adam and Eve story. So the Adam and Eve story is a book written by Dr. Chan Thomas. And what he proposes is that the Earth's poles shift every 6,500 years. So the poles shift caused the planet to be at a standstill with dramatic impacts like massive earthquakes and tsunamis. So the long and short of it is air and water continue to move while the Earth is still, causing in surges rapid temperature extremes. So after 6 days, poles restabilize in new positions with former polar areas now becoming tropical. So how many times, Pedro, have you gone hiking outside of Las Vegas? And they talk about how Red Rock Canyon, which is a national park, at one point on Earth was underwater. Now it's a desert. That would align with that. And so the global flood resulting from pole shifts may account for the flood, for the shared floor myths across cultures. So long and short of it, what he's basically saying is that the world has started and restarted 6 or 7 different times, about every 6,500 years. And it's because the poles get shifted. So the world stands still, but the earth, water, and wind keeps on going as normal. What that does is create huge tsunamis, huge floods, which overtake the world. But literally, we've started over 7 or 8 different times, And it happens about every 6,500 years.
The Adam and Eve story was classified, and there was only a few pages that were redacted heavily allowed to be shown to the public. And it basically discussed a dramatic air and water shift on Earth. So what would happen is the winds would surge and the temperatures would rise and water would continuously move, but the Earth would stop. Now, I don't know if I agree with that theory, but that's what he proposed. If what we were reading that was heavily redacted made any sense. Now, Dr. Chan Thomas was a very respected doctor during his time. And for the U.S. government to classify his work, I think that is wrong. To suppress ideas is, throughout history, has been a very bad policy of government. I mean, burning books in the Weimar Republic or having China getting rid of Bibles, it's always a bad idea. So who knows? That could be the case. Maybe not.
Well, he's basically saying that. So he's basically saying that the Earth's pole shifts every 6,500 years is symbolic and metaphoric of Noah's Ark. Basically, he's saying that Noah's Ark is metaphoric for the pole shifts every 6,500 years. So whether you believe that it was the Bible version or scientific version, regardless, if you believe that the flood happened and Noah's Ark existed, the flood had to have come from something, whether it was God creating it or scientifically. Either way, if you think that it happened, this would be proof of it. And he's just basically saying that the Bible knows this, but the Bible was using Noah's Ark metaphorically for you to understand that every 6,500 years the poles will shift.
Is the world flat or is it round?
I have a good friend who believes it's absolutely square, absolutely flat. And he's a cloud architect for Microsoft. Super intelligent. But he's like borderline spectrum autism. And he's 100% believed. He sends me stuff all the time through text, man. On the Earth's flat. I'm like, cool. Sounds good.
All right. Well, think about this for a second. Think about this. If the world is flat, could Dr. Chan Thomas, right? Mm-hmm. Dr. Chan Thomas. Could that happen? What he's describing? I don't know. I don't think so. But I do know that every society going back in time has mentioned the flood. And it's a global flood. And that is almost undisputable at this point. They've found archaeological evidences, scrolls, they've found tablets in Samaria that there is a flood myth. And it did happen. And I don't know how you get, 6 by 6 foot clams in some of the biggest mountain ranges on Earth if that didn't happen, right? But whatever. That being said, I wasn't there, don't know. I do know that I believe that there was a flood, okay? And that being said, it's an interesting concept, but I'm not putting a lot of weight to it. So let's go to the next one. You're saying who controls the world?
So an interesting thought, basically. Have you ever asked yourself who controls the world? So let's break down the process of this quick. The end answer is the UN, okay? And the United Nations coordinates major institutions like banks, assets. People need to understand the UN coordinates major things like banks, assets, tech companies, the whole 9 yards. The UN was founded after World War II to uphold peace and address global issues. The UN has heavily influenced the UN since the 1990s by voting unfavorably for candidates and pushing its own agenda. Because if you claim to have global issues, you can claim to have global solutions, which points to the end result of them wanting to have one global currency. And it was all started at the very beginning from the UN being formed. The UN will vote for certain things and vote for certain countries and not for certain countries. They purposely move in a direction that they want to. Their end goal, the UN's idea is that if we are one world, we will have one world peace. And we want to create one world currency. That's who controls everything. That's who's going to control everything. They're behind BlackRock. They're behind everything. And I'm sorry, if you claim to have global issues, then you can justify global solutions. And the only way to have global solutions is to have one global government and one global currency.
Who controls the world, Brett? Answer, we have no idea. The people that we see are low rent. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, back in the day, the Vanderbilts, all those Warburgs, low rent. Those people, they're now who control the world. They developed organizations to consolidate power to a few. For example, the United Nations, the WEF, the World Bank. And the reason they have developed these organizations is to lead this world to a place. We can get there by just understanding that there is something called evil and there is something called good. The good is transparent all around us. The smile of a dog, the curve of your wife's hip, the ocean. The bad crawls in the night. Can't see it. So, who controls the world, my friend? It's an evil, dark place.
The shadows.
The shadows. The IMF, UN, the League of Nations before them, they're now who control the world. They're the puppets of the puppet masters. And the puppet masters have an agenda. And we're heading towards that agenda at a very high speed. Right now, the world is even worse than when we were kids. Think about it. Think about how much has changed since we were kids. Look at it. What kind of craziness are we living in, Brett? Where people can't even call you a man because you're being gender biased. You have different pronouns.
They're 12 years old, and you're letting them have medical decisions over their body that's going to affect them for the rest of their life. And they're 12 years old, 17 years old. When I was in high school in the early 90s, aging myself, the thing for guys was to get your ear pierced. And I remember I tried to get my ear pierced at like 3 or 4 different locations, and they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't let me get my ear pierced without my parents' permission and my mom being there, which finally happened. That was simply just to get my ear pierced. And now you're telling me that a kid is 10 or 11, 12 years old, and you're saying they have a medical right and a medical decision to have life-altering effects to their body? Crazy.
In California right now, they're trying to pass rules, maybe they already have, that will allow the state to take your child away from you if you're coaching or telling them what to say to try and avoid the surgery that they may want to have. That is absolutely insane. So we're living in some really crazy times. But here's one that really gets to me. Food. They are actively buying out most of the available farmland. In Denmark, the farmers are going absolutely crazy right now because they're trying to come in and put impossible barriers for these people to be able to farm their land. And they can't meet these requirements that are being placed on them because they're impossible. So they're trying to take over the land. And the end result is just to basically have it go under so that they can bring in their fake food and harm the population. And then one thing that got me is, do you know that most of our breads are not allowed to be sold in almost any country in the world?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they put so much crap in our bread that
Preservatives and stuff?
France, Italy, Germany, all of Europe, I think China, Japan, from what I understand, they don't allow us to sell them our grains the way they're set up, or our breads the way they're done, better said, because they put so much stuff in them
When they're grown.
It's toxic. So you've got that, but how about all of the processing companies for food that have been put in fires as of late? It is insane to think about all of these slaughterhouses, these farms you name it, going up in flames. I don't see why they would do that. I don't see why Bill Gates would get into the farming world. I don't see why these big billionaires are all trying to buy out the land. It makes little sense unless you understand Agenda 2030. Then it starts to make sense. Do you know that there was an agreement done with Agenda 2030? They agreed, and I can't remember the exact year, but I'll post it. They agreed that they would bring the population down to 800 million. Okay. How many people are in our population right now?
Between 8 or 9 billion.
No, it's about 8 billion.
8 billion.
Yeah. So if there's 8 billion, and let's call it rounded up to a billion, that means they have to get rid of 6 billion people.
They have to get rid of 7 out of 8 people.
So,
right?
So think about it this way.
They have to get rid of 7 out of 8 people.
How are they going to do that? And then you know what? In that same meeting, they actually gave ideas, proposals to do that. All right. Some of them were to mess with the food supply. Check. All right. Then you got the economy. Check. Then there's stuff like pandemics. Check. So all of this is moving at an unbelievable pace.
So the many worlds theory, aka quantum immortality theory, which is basically 5 things. It basically states that when you die in one reality, you continue living in another reality. And this is some really trippy shit, right? So when a person dies, their consciousness simply transfers. What it says is that when a person dies, their consciousness simply transfers to a parallel universe in which they did not die. So when you die in reality, you continue living in another branch where you survived. Therefore, from your subjective experience, you can never fully die, as is there's always a version of you somewhere that lives on. Now, there's a few problems with this. Number one, to test this, one would need to repeatedly tempt death situations with a high probability of dying. Number 2, each time death is narrowly avoided, it suggests that you're shifted to another reality where you didn't die. And then number 4, to test this, one would need to repeatedly tempt death in situations with high probability of dying. And number 5, each time death is narrowly avoided, it suggests that you shifted to another reality where you didn't die. Here's the main issues. Number 1, to test this, one would need to repeatedly put yourself in situations with a high probability of dying. That is obviously pretty dangerous. Number 2, dying purposely is extremely dangerous and unethical. That's the other problem, is that did you know that dying is extremely dangerous? Who would have thought? Number 3, even if the theory of quantum immortality is true, it's not clear what the implications are. Here's my main question is, would the person be able to maintain their memories and their identity if they shifted to a parallel universe?
I'm going to blow your mind. Quantum immortality theory. The many world theory, Brett. It's interesting. I saw an episode of Flash, and Flash it was on Netflix, by the way, would run real fast, and then all of a sudden he went into another world. So on this Earth, maybe many other Earths, somehow he got to these other Earths, and he lived and found another Flash. Pretty interesting stuff. And so they've been propagating this idea for a long time, that do you die in this world and then just go to another world and continue living this same life? But the question is, do you continually age, and do you keep your memories? If that's what you're saying. The answer to that is you would have to keep your memories, right? But then is everybody in the other world going to be subject to your memories? Because when Flash went to the other world, the world was different.
So I think what they're saying is there's many different parallel universes that you exist in at the exact same time. What they're basically proposing is you live in many different parallel universes at the exact same time. However, each universe could be open to different doors, different opportunities, different situations that's different for each parallel universe, right? So for each time that you made a bad decision, in another universe, you made a good decision. So in a sense, you whitewash all the other parallel universes with each other to always arrive at the outcome that was meant for you anyways.
Remember I said I blew your mind, remember? All right. Angels. You've heard of them. Good question would be, why are angels not able to be forgiven by God.
I have no idea. Interesting.
It is. Why does man get a pass, but angels don't? The answer, angels don't die.
Interesting.
They can't. Forgiveness of sins comes through death. Without death, there's no forgiveness of sin. What did Jesus, the Son of God, do? He died for our sins. And when we die, if we accept that sin, we're now washed by the blood of the Lamb. We're washed by God. We're able to go back and be in God's good graces again. But angels don't have that. See, when an angel sins, because they're immortal, there's no forgiveness of sin. Deep.
Yeah.
All right.
Like, I don't understand the game of it, which is my overall feeling on religion. Like you just said right there, I mean, that was a great story. But to me, that's what it was. A great story. A great fictitious story. Okay, so you're telling me that we were put on earth to follow someone else's, like, okay, I'm going to give you the gift of life, and your obligation while you live your life is to worship me? What kind of bullshit is that? Like, I was made and I exist to worship something? Okay, let's say that I was. Why? What's the point of that? I don't understand the game of it. Like, I was put here, and while I'm here, the main point I'm trying to take away from this is I need to worship God and acknowledge God because he put me here. Okay, but why? What's with the game of needing to put me here, and then I need to believe in you in order to make it worth it, and then I die, and then that's when I really get rewarded, and then, like, I don't understand the game of everything. Like, that's what I don't understand. And so to me, whenever I hear any religious story, I don't care what religion it is, that's a great fictitious story to me. You know, and that's the way that I view things because I don't understand the why. Okay, well, God said that if you do this, then that, and if you don't do that, then this is a repercussion. Why? Like, why is there a game of I need to do this or I don't need this? Well, you were put here to worship me. You were put here. All I know is I woke up one day and I was in a body that I didn't ask for, in a world that I didn't ask for. And I wake up one day and they say, here you go. No instruction manual, no rules, figure it out. And they wonder why humans do what humans do. That's the way that I look at it.
You are not alone, brother. I'd say a good portion of humanity secretly feels the way you do. But let's bring it back a notch. I don't know if you have a good relationship with your dad or your mom. Don't know. But let's assume that you do. Mm-hmm. Okay. They just exist. They're not perfect. But there's part of them that you really love that is awesome because you know them. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. And that would probably be true with most, not all. All right. So, but most would have a best friend or someone that have a dog, you know, they love, that knows them. They know the dog, right? Whatever. Doesn't matter. There's another entity that they love. They feel love. They understand love. The only way we know that is because that love is ingrained in us when we were born, right? So you now, with your earthly relationships, you have esteem and respect for those people. But when you don't know God, then all you can think about is the things that would repel you from God. And that is generated by the sin that you currently have and the sin you were born into, that you had nothing to do with. So you're right. We're all born on the earth, but we're not born without a manual. There is a manual, okay? It's your acceptance of that manual. And the word religion, you know who would have exception with that word? Jesus himself. He was probably the biggest rebel of his time. He'd walk in to the temple. He walked into the temple and saw the money changers and saw their blasphemous ways and just grabbed that table and turned it over, right? And he wasn't touched because he had so many people following him, so much respect. He wasn't touched, but they wanted to kill him then, right? And he called them a brood of vipers. Sadducees and the Pharisees at the time, both are gone, okay? And they were very legalistic types of religion. And Jesus wasn't having any of it. He says, no. He says, you need a relationship with me. You don't need to do all this stuff. You just need to believe in me. And so the way to him is very easy. The yoke is very light. Salvation comes through faith. And the faith is you believe that he was here, he rose, and he died for you. It's a personal thing. And then once you get to know who he is through that faith, Brett, here's what happens. Once you know who Jesus is and you're washed by his blood, you change. That's why they're called reborn people, because the people are now indwelled by the Spirit, which they're indwelled by the Holy Spirit. So you accepting him will now have a relationship with him. And it'll be just like you have a relationship with the people you love here on earth. Well, you know them and you respect them. And there are certain things that you probably don't do out of respect for your family, right? As all of us are subject to that. But I honestly believe that we're here and there is a game afoot. I believe that. And that game, you're either on one side or the other side.
I wholeheartedly agree. That's my point. It's a game. Here's my point. What's with the game? Why? Everything that you said, if you believe that's true, awesome. But my end result or my end question of all that is, okay, why though? What's with all of that? And you say there is a manuscript to life. It's called the Bible. Well, that's great for your religion. But what if you don't believe in your religion? And according to your religion, it says that man sins by simply being alive. So you're telling me to believe in something that was created, religion, by man, which their own religion says man sins. So it doesn't by default of that say that the Bible is incorrect because it's created by man, and according to the Bible and man sins by being alive?
You ever watch Mike Tyson fight when he has this little smile right before he's going to knock the guy out?
Yeah, go for it. I welcome it. I've had this conversation many times with priests and pastors and everything.
Not with me, buddy.
Go for it.
And here's what it is. You cannot judge God by man. Can't do it.
It says we're built in his mirror
You
image.
said you let me. You said you let me, so let me.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry.
So God is omnipresent. He's omniscient. He's everywhere. He hears everything. God is beyond this time. God is everything. And he's just and he's loving. But don't confuse the just with the loving. Man decided that they would disobey God, and so sin entered the world. The ramifications of that sin are man's, not God's. God hates sin. He hates what man has done to other men and to children.
But he allowed it to happen. He gave by that happening, he gave us that created free will, correct?
Yes.
So what's with the game? Like again, what's with the game?
Okay.
Like what?
Okay,
Like for what?
Let me go. The game isn't about us. The game that was started by man. So this is deeper than just you and me.
But
Hold on. The game started a long time ago.
But why?
It started because of man's disobedience.
But why? What's like why is there a game of that? Like why is there a whole that's what I'm saying. No one can ever answer that for
let's
me.
Let's
why?
not get caught up.
What?
Hold on. Let's not get caught up in vernacular for a second.
Okay.
Okay. You could call it game or you can just call it life. Okay. But the point is that the sin that I'm talking about happened before you. And then your life, you've had added to man's sin yourself in your own ways.
According to you and your religion.
Well, hold on. The point is, I'm answering you in what you're asking me.
Okay, fair enough.
Right?
Fair enough.
So what I'm trying to tell you, Brett, it's this simple, is that you, as a man or a woman that's out there, if you decide you're going to follow God, okay, then what happens is you've decided that you're going to join God and his forces, right? And God will decide what he's going to do with you. But it's a free choice. It's a gift that is there for you. But you better accept it as soon as you possibly can, because no one has their time.
I do agree that it is a gift. Like, so I think we're on the same page with a lot of things, right? The difference to me is I view things as spiritual and you view things as religious. And to me, religion is spirituality involving a human construct. And I just don't like humans who, according to the Bible, sin by simply being alive. I don't like them telling me that this is what God's rules are and what God's rules aren't. Because they're a human. And according to God, they're flawed. But yet, they're setting rules of what is and what isn't. So to me, I'm with you on almost every single thing that we're talking about. But I view it more as a spiritual thing versus attaching a human to it and giving me rules and regulations, which to me turns into religion.
We're not about religion. We're about a personal relationship that I share with God. And That is what I'm trying to say. As far as rules, I don't know if you know this, but how do you differentiate what's right and what's wrong, right, in your own life? How do you do that?
I agree, and that's where I say that we're very much on the same page. We just view it differently.
Okay.
Because to me, it's a natural feeling, right? Doing something good for somebody, you feel good about that naturally for a reason. When you do something bad and immoral to somebody and you have a guilty conscience or whatever it is, you feel bad naturally for a reason. Those to me are the rules and guidance in life that we go by, which are our natural feelings, right? Love feels good for a reason because we're supposed to love. Hate feels bad for a reason because we're not supposed to hate. So we're very much on the same page as far as natural living. And that's where I associate it with spirituality and not religion.
We'll address spirituality in a minute. But where do you think you get your compass for what's good and what's bad? And have you heard of the 10 Commandments?
I think that I get it from something that is bigger than us that exists out there. You call it God. You call it God. I call it spirituality.
Okay.
So
Wait
again,
a minute.
because
Have you heard of the 10 Commandments?
yes,
The Bible makes it clear that God writes those commandments on your heart. Okay, not just us, but every man. And it's been proven by adventurers that go into these different tribes, missionaries and people that study these things. And when they go there, they find that they all share, for the most part, what's right and what's wrong. That is an elegant proof of design. That proves that we as a species adhere to certain rules, guidelines. Where did the code come from? I guess if you want to talk in your world, where did that code? Well, I believe that we have God, and he created it, and he instilled the good into our hearts. And therefore, that's why we're going to be judged through what we knew about right and wrong, which is already written in our heart. The problem is, if you're made aware of who Jesus is and his sacrifice, but you chose not to accept it, then you're without excuse in the end.
I get what you're saying, and that sounds good, but here's my problem with that. What if at the very end, before Hitler killed himself, he accepted Jesus into his heart? You're telling me he has the same outcome and the same fate as Mother Teresa? Simply by accepting Jesus into his heart at the end? Let's just per se.
All that brings down to a great argument that has been propagated by men throughout time. Is this guy in death row? They kill all these people, and if at the very last minute he accepts Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, does he get expunged? Is he in heaven? That's what you're saying. Well, perhaps. I can't answer that because I don't know. Only God knows and judges the heart, right? So you, by taking the step of faith, and your heart's in it, you will see fruit, that your life will change. You'll see things in your life differently than you see it now. And perhaps that works. Perhaps it doesn't for you, but it does happen. Remember I told you Mike Tyson, this little smile and all that? Let me get back to that. The point is this. When we're looking for excuses for God because we're saying that God would not allow evil to be in the world because it is just too gruesome. For example, those children that died in Israel, as an example, right? That is just too gruesome. Why would they have been killed that way? It's different if you kill a man with a gun and you have a gun.
And they did that in the name of religion.
Well, hold on. In the name of their religion, right? Again, I'm not a part of a religion, right? What I'm saying is that the death that came because those two entities believed and had, we'll use your word, their own religion, right? The point is, it's man against man. It's man filled with evil. It is not God's fault for man's free will that he gave them. Now, hold on. Do the angels have free will?
I don't know. Are they considered man according to the Bible?
No.
Then, isn't Lucifer God's angel that descended? So I guess so.
So they have a type of free will, I would say. So
He descended. I mean, that's
man has free will. Angels, I think, have their own free will,
Okay.
their own version. But there's a difference between the man and the angels. The angels got to see God in his glory and get to see him, right? Or get to be around his Shekinah glory. Man doesn't. See, man has got the greater, the onus is greater on man to believe than an angel. An angel's born into or created into existence by the Creator into a beautiful world. Hypothetically, we don't know
Because they've seen the
Right,
proof.
right. We have to literally turn around, look for God, believe in God, analyze things, and say, okay, this is probably right, this is probably wrong, whatever, right? So that's what's called faith. So we can't put the deaths, the diseases, the pestilence, and all the things that man creates on God, because God isn't at fault for man's decision. Can God stop it?
That's convenient.
Well, hold on. The question is, can God stop it? Bet he can stop it in a minute.
That's my point.
What as far as Jesus, when he was being held on the cross, you don't think there was 6 or 7 legions of angels that could have destroyed everybody and not made that happen? All Jesus had to say, enough.
Okay, why didn't he?
Because he loved us and he wanted a way for us to be able to go into heaven. See, without blood, there's no forgiveness of sin, Brett. None. And so that's why death is so important to this equation, because you live your life in not knowing God face to face. You never see him. You die. Then that blood washes you, and then you're born again, and then you're accepted into the kingdom of heaven. And you know what? Your good works God sees as dirty rags, right? They're not. They're your best work is seen as filthy rags to God. So your only thing that you're going to be given when you go in is a crown to life, okay, once you become a Christian. But then you'll get other little crowns for doing the little things you may have done in his name. But the point is, the only one that matters is for your belief that there was a Jesus, and then that Jesus came and died for you.
So
Hold on.
Yeah. So explain all of that to someone who's never heard it before and see if it makes sense to them at all. Oh, number 2, I'll just be honest with you, man. That doesn't sound like the kind of God I want to believe in. One that's cruel and vindictive and will hold judgment, and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. I mean, listen, how I naturally feel is right and how I naturally feel wrong has nothing to do with God. It has everything to do with spirituality. God is something that humans associate to spirituality. And to answer the question about the free will, can God interject? Then why doesn't he? Let me give you a scenario, okay? What if you were walking down the street and you turned the corner and you saw some guy sitting there kicking a puppy to death? What if you just stood there and watched it happen and didn't intervene? What would that make you? That's what God does. Stands by and watches it all unfold and does nothing. Now, if you did that, what would that make you? I mean, that's the way that I view it. It's just, to me, religion is like, there's a convenient excuse for this, and then, well, you just need to have faith on that. That's not how it works. And I think at the end of the day, you and I have pretty much the same alignment and viewpoints on life. Like, you want to be a good person as much as I want to be a good person, right? I don't want to be a piece of crap human being no more than you do. You want to treat your family and wife right? I want to treat my wife and family right. I want to be a good citizen. You want to be a good citizen, you know? So I think that's the main point and the main vibe and the main thing to follow in life. You know, I think the fundamental difference between you and I is you attach the name God and bring a human into it with religion. And I feel and view things basically the same as you, but I look at it more of a spiritual thing. Because when you start bringing in a God factor of it, there's a whole bunch of rules and regulations that just don't make sense to me. And at the end of the day, like I said, all that stuff that you explain and this and that and the angels and, you know, that to me, again, and that's why I started out, I'm like, explain all that to somebody who's never heard it before or isn't your religion. Think about how that would sound. You know what I mean? So that's...
Number one, God does deal, and very heavily, with the guy that's kicking that puppy. How he deals with it, it's on God. Okay? So God, in his divineness, will do his thing. Judgment is God's, right? Revenge is God's. As far as you keep mentioning, you know, all these rules and regulations, believe it or not, that's why God, Jesus says that his yoke is light, is because he's come to remove all those shackles that man put on everybody. If you want to talk about rules and regulations, okay, man creates more rules that we even know about it. I don't know if you know this, but they say that if you drive 7 miles in any city, you've committed, I don't know how many freaking crimes, right? There's so much legislation and laws that are being passed in the United States that is insanity to try to even think that you can keep them all. The IRS code is 800 plus thousand pages, right? How could you keep all that in anything? So no, man creates those laws. God, no. God has his laws, but they're just and moral laws to prevent you from kicking that puppy, like you were just mentioned, to prevent you from hurting those children. But if you don't follow those laws, then you have consequences to pay. So, and unfortunately, a lot of those guys that don't have God, they're going to end up in the immortal, the lake of fire, and be with those angels and be killed and be gone in everlasting anguish. It's going to be terrible. So it's not a religion, all right? It's a personal relationship. You don't get in because you're a Catholic. You don't get in because you're a Mormon. You don't get in because you're a Jehovah's Witnesses. You don't get in because you have this members only jacket, all right, when it was popular. You get in because of a relationship, a personal relationship you had with Jesus.
But my point is this: what's the point of that?
Redemption.
Okay, so what's the point of having you born? So that you perform this way or that way, and this is the result of that. Like, what's the point of that whole game? What's the point of the whole, like, well, I'm going to have you born, and then if you do bad, you're going to go over here in a lake of fire, and if you do well, then you ascend. What's the point of all of that, man, is what I'm trying to say. What's the point of it?
Redemption, again.
But why? Why do we have to have redemption? Why even exist in the first place?
This happened before you. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You know what? A lot of us think the world revolves around us, but it doesn't.
I don't think that at all.
No, I'm not saying you do. I'm saying a lot of us do. And we forget that there was a world before us, right? We were born after the fall.
Then explain it to me.
I am. I just did.
I've heard it a million times. I don't believe it.
Do you understand the fall?
But what's the point of it?
The fall,
what's the point of the beginning of time, the fall, the point of everything? What's the point?
Because man chose to sin.
But why even have this whole man chooses to sin or not? Why even have that exist in game in the first place?
That's the beauty of it, because it's not going too soon. See, Brett, this isn't forever. This is finite. The time that we have left right now is very, very little. First of all, man's life.
I agree.
Yeah, a man's life is little compared to eternity,
Agreed.
right? So we're going to live through this, but then it's going to be over. And then the wheat from the chaff are going to be separated, the believers and non-believers. And then from there, hold on, listen to this. Yeah. It's going to be that game, what you're saying, that baloney, what you're saying. I agree, and most of us would. It is a bunch of baloney, right? But at the end, it's going to be over. And then we're going to be with God, and we're going to be doing things that we can't even imagine right now, okay? So, yes, the game, as you say, is going to be over. It's going to be over soon.
Here's the thing. You think that end game equals heaven. I think that end game is my energy transitioning to another form of energy in some other universe. That's what I think it is. It's not a heaven. It's not a reward and paradise. It's you and I are simply energy, and we are transferring our energy from one source to another. That's all I believe.
All right, so let's assume your logic. Okay.
But I believe it all has a bigger picture.
Hold on.
I just don't put the name God to
You're
it.
saying it goes from one place to another, but what if the place that it goes to just happens to be in the great white throne, and you just happen to see God, and you're like, I was right about the energy thing, right, God?
Listen.
And God says, you were right about that.
Listen,
but you're wrong about everything else.
Here's what we do agree. Here's what we do agree. Is at the end of the day, I always tell everybody.
Checkmate, baby.
Well, not necessarily, because you still can't get past the game part. Nobody ever can. Like, that's the thing no one can ever stop me on, because you can't, right? That's why it's called faith and not proof.
No, there's plenty of proof.
None, according to your faith, there's not really proof. There's scientific things that have happened, but that doesn't, like...
There's more proof.
No, there's
Brett,
not.
Hold on.
There's
just this one part.
Okay.
There's more proof that Jesus existed than you and I do.
Okay, but who's to say that he was a son of God?
What do you mean?
So you can have proof that Noah's Ark existed. You can have proof that Jesus existed. Prove that he was the son of God, I think he was a regular dude, bro. I think Jesus was a regular person.
All right, hold on. Let me hit you with this. We got to stop after this, though.
Okay, I know.
You're enjoying this bet.
Dude, I am.
But let me just leave it
I
at
love
this.
that we can be civil, though, man. And not yeah.
Because we're friends.
Yeah, of course.
And you know
I
what?
respect, by the way, everything that you...
If I don't tell you this, then your blood's on my hands. But now, guess what? It's no longer on my hands.
Well, man.
So here it is. Watch this. He was a regular dude, with one exception. He was born by God through Mary.
That's the exception we don't believe in.
Hold on. So now, he was a regular dude. He was a carpenter through his dad.
So he was born without sex. He's a regular
He
dude.
was a regular dude.
It can't be. By the way he was born, and
Hold on.
conceptualized, he
He was
can't be.
fully man.
He's the only human in history to be born and conceptualized that way. And you're telling me he was normal.
Yep.
It
Normal
contradicts
guy.
that. You understand
No,
that,
no,
right?
I see what you're going, but hold on. Well, the point is, was he all male? I mean, all man. Yes, he was. He was all man. Now, the point is, he had the same temptations as you and I. Women, stealing, etc. Gluttony, you name it. He had them all. So he was even further tested, worse than you and I will ever be, directly by Satan himself. Okay? So at his weakest moment, which was when he did his 40-day fast. But watch this. Jesus, at the end of the day, was a regular dude, but I'm sure you know this. If you don't, there's 66 66 books in the Bible, right? Well, in the Old Testament, there is, and I can give you an exact number, there is so many prophecies that were fulfilled at the day of his birth. There was, I think it was something like 300 plus prophecies fulfilled the day he was born. Did you know that?
How do you know that?
Those books, well, because they're in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, it's been proven. Just
Was
take
written
it
by a bunch of different people throughout.
Take it for face
that's my
value
point.
and do your research,
okay,
right?
Okay, fair enough.
Just like we're doing our
Yep,
podcast.
okay, fair
take it
enough.
for face value,
Yep.
then do your research. And I challenge you to do it.
I will.
All of these different books, right, had in the Old Testament 300, and then in the New Testament, then you had all kinds of prophecies being done. So at the end of the day, you had all these different prophecies done that were fulfilled in this one man. Okay. There's no way he can't be Messiah, Brett. No way. And you know what? There's a bunch of Jews that believe, okay, that left the rabbinical teachings to go into Christianity because they see it. As a matter of fact, this is going to blow your mind. Okay. There was this top rabbi that was like over 60 years a rabbi. I mean, this guy was respected. He was a fellow at the university, top rabbi. You know, imagine the beard and the hat. I mean, the whole bit. He's scholar, prophecy, the whole bit. But he had written down a letter, and he put it away, and he says, no one's to open this letter until 5 years or 10 years after my death. And it is very important. And he gave it to, I think, the head rabbis over there, and they respected his wishes, and they thought that it contained a master revelation. So they didn't want to touch it. Fear of God, right? Big. Fear of God is huge. So anyways, they opened it up, and they found something as simple as Yeshua is the Messiah. That's simple. But he didn't want to be ostracized in his time. But he had come.
What did it say?
That Yeshua, Jesus, okay, is the Messiah. So this guy who studied the scripture his whole life, taught the scripture his whole life, came to the conclusion, and many Jews have, many Muslims have, many of every religion have come to the conclusion based on study that he has. As a matter of fact, there's been top scholars that have scoffed God, that said, I'm going to prove that he wasn't, went on to write a book, and then at the end ended up writing a book to prove God existed. Okay, so Brett, you can decide that you want to be a cynic about this, and I'm not being disrespectful, but if you do your research as good as you do, you do crazy research, brother, I give you credit. If you do this crazy research on Jesus, I can guarantee you by your next podcast, pull it up, and you're just going to blow your mind.
So here's the thing, man. I'm just going to do this, right? I'm just going to live my life trying to be as good of a person as I can. And I bet you and I end up in the same spot. I bet we do. And to say that I can live as good, as clean, and as moral life as you or anybody else and make a conscious decision to do that, and to say that because at the end, I didn't accept the game into my heart, that we're going to end up in different spots, I absolutely refuse to believe in that, and I absolutely refuse to believe in that kind of God, period.
Okay, can I have the last word on this, so then we can...
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Cool. Yep.
Brett, this is your everlasting soul. Think about it. Do your own research. That's all I can say. All right? Love you, guy.
On September 10th, 2001, a day before September 11th, obviously, 2001, a day before the 9/11 attacks, Donald Rumsfeld gave a speech at the Pentagon basically saying how the Pentagon had $2.3 trillion in money on spending that was completely unaccountable. They couldn't find out where that money went to. The very next day, on September 11th, one of the planes flew into the exact same spot at the Pentagon that Donald Rumsfeld was giving that speech at the day before. Oh, right. Sorry. Anyways, so some speculate that the 9/11, some people speculate that the 9/11 events was a distraction, so you wouldn't have to know where that $2.3 trillion went. So the coincidental part about it is that when you look at the money spent total on the Iraq and Afghanistan war, do you know what that number comes out to? $2.4 trillion. So Donald Rumsfeld, the day before the 9/11 attacks, publicly announces that the Pentagon has lost and is unaccounted for $2.3 trillion. 9/11 happens, and the end game is the money spent on the Afghan and Iraq war, which were in response to 9/11, was $2.4 trillion. That's pretty close to the $2.3 trillion missing, isn't it?
What's also interesting is a lot of those records that may have been kept for that 2.3 were housed in Building 7. Now, if you remember Building 7, that's the one that kind of fell down without any planes hitting it. That's like a magical moment in the world. How did that happen? I mean, Houdini came and says, "You shall fall," and it fell.
Chris Angel magic.
Amazing stuff. Yeah. And then if you look at some of the players, all right, you had, Dick Cheney with Halliburton, and he got no-bid contracts for all the food that were given to all the soldiers, no-bid contracts on a bunch of other things that I'm not going to bore you with. But did you know how much the budget was for the first attack in Iraq? Give it a guess.
So how much was it for the Iraq and Afghanistan war? What was the budget?
Yeah, 2007. Do you remember?
Say it again. Do you know what the budget for?
In October 2007, the Congressional Budget Office came up with the budget for the Iraq-Afghanistan intervention was $2.4 trillion. Now, do you believe in coincidences that on September 10th, Ronald Rumsfeld says, "Hey, we're missing 2.3, and then all of a sudden, trillion, and then all of a sudden, the budget is now approved for 2.4 trillion in Afghanistan and Iraq. That kind of smells to me as a weird coincidence, but there's something else. Money laundering. What are they doing with that kind of money? What did they do? Well, I don't know about you, but have you ever heard of underground bases? Do you ever hear about what's going on underneath the Denver airport? You ever hear about those kind of things? Those are good topics for our next podcast.
Shadow government. That's what it funded. What it funded.
That
Shadow
leads
governments.
us to our last.
Yeah, we need to do it. So the moon economy, which is an upcoming economy. Can you believe we're saying that? The moon economy. So the four main things of how there can actually be a moon economy would be providing transportation to and from the Earth and moon, mining, because people need to understand there's a lot of rare earth elements that you need for iPhones and other devices that we use in modern day that come from rare earth elements that are extremely hard to find here on Earth, but they're a lot more plentiful on the moon. If not, there's some elements they can find on the moon that they simply cannot find on the Earth, right? So transportation back and forth from Earth to the moon, mining for elements that can be used in other things, building and maintaining a lunar infrastructure. So if we're going to eventually live on there, we have to have structures built, correct? That would be another economy of it. And number 4, providing tourism and educational services. So NASA, China, and a few of these private companies are all getting involved. So NASA and China and a few other private companies want to permanently build bases on the moon. Once they build these bases on the moon, they're going to use those bases for training and to basically how to then use that as a launch pad to start getting to Mars.
Really? Do you remember Time Machine where they blow up the freaking moon because they try to mine it? And right? And we go into like a Planet of the Apes type situation. I mean, the whole world apocalyptic and all that. Anyway. All right. Well, that's interesting.
And let me just say this. The funny thing about it is China wants to start doing some exploration and start building on the South Pole of the moon. And so you have all of these different countries that want to partake in the new moon economy. And supposedly they've all made a pact to play nice and work on this together.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling all we're going to do is take a continuation of what we do on Earth, and we're just going to have a continuation of that, and we're just going to move to what we do on Earth and the same bullshit that we do now, and we're just going to move it to the moon and continue forward with that.
Could you imagine a freaking
I mean, because here's the thing, to get back to spirituality and religion, I'm a firm believer that God makes humans the way that he makes humans. And it's up to us to decide what we do with how we're made to do good or bad, right? So I do believe we're on the same page with that. But at the end of the day, I think that God makes humans the way that he does. And until he quits making humans the way that he does, we are simply going to continue on doing, whether we're on Earth or the moon or Mars or Venus. It doesn't matter. Humans are going to continue on being humans.
Let me read this to you. In 1965, there was a scientist that claimed that the moon is plasma. And he writes an unbelievable story about it and explains it in great detail. And it was a report done by ABC by a reporter, Bob Sanders, saying that the Russian and Americans are thinking of landing on the moon. And Foster, the scientist, replies, oh, well, that will never happen. Not on the moon, on Mars or Venus and other planets, yes. But the moon is definitely, as I assert, a plasma.
How did he know?
Well, he's a scientist that studied that for up to years. But
And all the other scientists said it's not true.
well, hold on. So the point is, right, I don't think the moon is a big rock body. I think they say that they've hit the moon and they hear a bell ringing, ding, 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 for hours, okay? So it's not a solid object. So if you ever watch plasma, the way plasma works is an interesting study. But I'm kind of there. I don't believe we landed on the moon. And I definitely don't believe the Indians landed on the moon.
What? Indians landed where?
I know. You should see their animation that they've created to show that they landed on the moon just recently, like 2 months ago, right? Yeah. Exactly.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't think the moon can be landed on. I think it's not what they're purporting it to be. All right. Well, thank you for joining this interesting podcast with Urban Legend Crypto.